Fans, welcome to Sports Chat. A lot to talk about this week, most of it not good. As most of you all know, the comet came by. The once per quarter century loss to Kentucky happened yesterday. The longest streak in college football has come to an end. Not a lot to say good about this game.
No, really, it was two bad teams playing really badly.
Al on Facebook made the statement he's seen dead possums play better football. Of course, he said that to a rabid Kentucky fan that was just mooing about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the team quit, and that's partly Dooley's fault, and that's partly the team's fault. Torrin posted after the game, nobody wanted to be there or be out there playing. That's your senior starter on offense, running back, supposed leader of the team. And, that's a ridiculous statement coming from a game that had, that's going to get you to a bowl game. That game's going to get you, keeping the streak alive, the long streak in college football. And that's going to send you out as a winner as a senior. You don't want to be out there playing. That's ridiculous.
There wasn't a lot of what I would call senior leadership or really leadership this year anyway.
No, it's been a very broken year. I mean, there's just a chorus of fire Dooley calls out there. And it's not going to happen, I don't think, anyway. I mean, it would set the program back even more unless you for sure have a top flight coach lined up. I mean, you have to have a top flight coach willing to take the job before you ever let him go. And I just don't see it happening. UT won't spend money. I don't know why. They have the third largest athletic budget in the country behind, I think, Florida and Ohio State, maybe Texas, maybe the fourth largest. It's one of the top five anyway. Well over $110 million a year. But they won't spend, any money on a coach. It doesn't make sense to me.
It literally is going to have to be an open up the wallet and win sort of deal.
I mean, that's the way you do it. That's the way Alabama done it. That's the way Florida did it when they hired Urban Meyer. That's the way that Ohio State's going to do it when they hire Urban Meyer. If you don't spend money, you're not going to win. That's just what you have to do.
That's why Auburn did it when they hired Cam Newton.
Yeah.
A little different, but
Well, Auburn had Cam Newton for that year, and they, I actually like, and if Dooley gets fired, and I kind of hope he doesn't because it's going to really be so rough on the program. I say give him next year. Most people don't. I wouldn't disagree strongly if they fired him because of the way the team was playing and the way it got worse as the year went on. Mm-hmm. But if they do, I would like to see him go after Tommy Tuberville.
Tuberville's a good coach.
He never did that poorly at Auburn. He got fired for having one bad year at Auburn. He had 13-0 year at Auburn just 4 or 5 years ago. And he's got Texas Tech. It improved dramatically this year.
Yeah, Texas Tech played some good ball this year.
I think they beat. Was it Oklahoma they beat?
Mm-hmm. It was when Oklahoma was just the darling of the polls.
I'm pretty sure Oklahoma was ranked number 1 in Texas Tech. Tuberville was a good coach, and you back him if you have to. Pay him a lot of money and get him to come back to the SEC. He knows the recruiting grounds. He was good at Auburn at getting a lot of good results out of players that weren't just loaded up rosters like Florida's roster.
And here's you talk about UT not spending the money. Not even saying this to be disparaging, but Pat Summitt is in the end of her career. She's the only coach that makes any real money there compared to other schools.
Pat Summitt is paid about probably 4 to 5 times the average coaching salary. That would be the equivalent of us paying a football coach probably close to $10 million a year. She gets paid more than Gino Auriemma by about 50%. And honestly, I love Coach Summitt in Tennessee, but Gino Auriemma is the most successful basketball coach in women's basketball in the last 20 years. He's won more national titles, had 3 or 4 undefeated teams, and he makes significantly less than what she makes.
So it's time to open up the purse. Maybe, we got the guy from Alabama. Obviously, Alabama knows how to spend money. I know that technically it's the trustees, not the athletics chancellor.
From what I understand about Dave Hart, they say he's more of a strong-willed kind of athletic director like Doug Dickey.
I would say, so he's more Doug Dickey than Mike Hamilton.
And Hamilton came in a position with no power. People can blame Hamilton all they want for this. He makes none of these decisions on hiring and firing. He never has and never would have. He may do some of the interviews, and you use a search firm for that. But honestly, he got really lucky, or UT got really lucky by going on the cheap and getting Bruce Pearl, who just was a brilliant coach. Mm-hmm. We'll see if they got lucky with Conzo Martin or not. I mean, they've played well.
I would say Conzo Martin.
You still have to win games. That's the bottom line. I don't think Memphis is as good as this hot 10 team like everybody thought they was. Duke's a good team, and they played Duke well. But you still have to start winning those games, and we'll see if he can win the games. He's beaten the team he should have beaten so far. But honestly, this team was picked 11th for whatever reason by the sports writers in the SEC. I don't know if they were just high, just got down there and had a fair and low than Las Vegas moment when they were making their picks or not. But this team it's got a lot more talent than that. It had 8 4-star players on it. But Dooley, if he got fired, I wouldn't be terribly upset. It probably, unless you can hire the right guy, it's going to kill the program, though. That's the risk you run. You'd rather have the right guy in place.
Right, and we've talked. If Dooley turns around and wins 8 to 10 games next year, obviously there's some good talent there. I mean, Bray and Hunter will be back, hopefully at least mostly healthy.
Well, the big thing that goes away, everybody talks about youth this year, that excuse is out the window next year. This team is going to be loaded with a lot of juniors, a lot of sophomores with a lot of experience next year.
That's true.
So the youth excuse will be gone. You can't use that anymore. Todd Kelly said that in the post game too. Todd Kelly, is a defensive end for Tennessee. He went on playing in the NFL for a lot of years. He said, this team was young this year. He said that's over. So next year there's no more excuses with youth.
And you got to wonder how different could things have been if Lane Kiffin would have stayed around.
A lot of people said we'd be on NCAA probation and all this stuff, but it turned out the violations, of course, the NCAA found nothing. There were minor violations. So we got the football program got essentially no penalties for it. And Kiffin, everybody hates him, and I don't blame you for hating him for the way he left Tennessee. But he's a great coach. USC's ravaged by probation right now, and they're really going to feel the effects in the next 2 years, but they're still having a rough time with it this year. Lost a lot of good players, and they're something like 9-2.
They are, in actuality, who should be playing in the Pac-12 championship game.
They would play at UCLA's place if not for the fact that they're banned from postseason play.
So who knows what would have happened there, but I don't know. Program probably would have been in better shape at that.
I mean, you could see that Kiffin was a good coach in the way he made Crompton into the worst quarterback I've ever saw, into a serviceable quarterback.
A drafted quarterback.
That saved, Crompton from being the UT's worst quarterback, and now sort of laid that on Matt Sims.
Probably makes AJ Suggs happy though.
To me though, I mean, at this point, the program needs the stability though of having a coach at least one more year, because there's been so much turmoil in the last couple of years. I mean, you're especially you're the juniors, seniors of this year. I mean, look how much change they've seen while they've been there.
Yeah.
It's been hectic.
You like I said, you literally cannot afford to change coaching staff at this point unless you have a superstar lined up to take over.
So, I think next year, get Bray's throwing hand healthy again. Because I mean, they put him back on the field, but you could tell that thumb was still bothering him. He wasn't throwing straight.
He wasn't 100%. He had strep throat apparently this week too, and had been running the high fever and was sick during the game. But still, this team, there's no excuse. You can use that excuse when you get beat against a good team, but this team should have rolled this Kentucky team. Frankly, this Kentucky team is terrible. I mean, my God, they just moved a wide receiver over to quarterback for this game.
Yeah.
And he ran
all over the field.
200 yards.
15 yards passing.
Had 15 yards passing. I mean, normally that would have been a good performance by the defense. If somebody runs the ball 60 times and only gets 200 yards rushing, it's only 3 yards to carry. That's stopping them and making them punt or go for it on 4th and 1 every time. The defense played fine. And the defense actually made a play that should have won the game when they stripped the ball from Kentucky and recovered the fumble that inexplicably to me the officials decided that he didn't fumble initially and then came back with a later explanation and said, well, we can't review who recovered the fumble.
Right. I think that defensively, Magic, the freshman linebacker, had a coming out party.
Majette and Johnson both had big games and they're big seasons. This team should be set. We lose LSU off the schedule. Arkansas loses a bunch of seniors. We're probably going to pick up Missouri. Missouri's not a great team. Florida's way down. South Carolina, they weren't very good this year. They went 9-2, but the East is pretty bad. And Vanderbilt is going to lose 32 seniors off this team. They're going to be terrible next year. I don't really see Kentucky improving any at all. They were awful this year. They'll be awful.
Actually, they'll, as bad as they were this year, they should be even worse because they lose a bunch of seniors.
I just don't see any way this team should win less than 8 games next year.
I've also heard some Kentucky fans that go, we're going to get Deshaun Mobley. He's a good running back. He was not the best running back I saw all year. Best running back I saw all year is coming to UT. Probably his defensive back, but he's coming to UT.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mobley's not going to go in and have an impact, I don't think, as a freshman like Randall Cobb had. Because Randall Cobb was 6'1" and 200.
Mobley, pounds. I was on field level. Mobley's not a big guy.
Mobley's 5'7" or 5'8".
He's not your prototypical SEC running back. I think he's talented.
He's fast. He has talent. When you're in high school and you're that fast, you're going to get a lot of yards rushing because you're not going to face defenders able
Chris
to
Johnson.
Especially at this level and in Tennessee. Tennessee's high school football talent is not on par with the football talent from other states. And I wish that was different. I wish we would get better. There's a few isolated players who are, but all in all, teams are much less.
Right. When you look at East Tennessee, you got state title games. Maryville's going, Powell's going, Greenville's going, CAK is going, and South Pittsburgh's going. There's some good teams there, but there's not a ton of Division I talent there.
You look at the Maryville players. They rarely ever make an impact in college. So they get some scholarships, but they rarely ever make a big impact in college. It doesn't happen very often. Every once in a while you get a Jason Witten out of East Tennessee. You'll get a John Henderson out of Middle Tennessee. A few players from the Memphis area, like Reggie White from the Chattanooga area. You get players, 1 or 2 players that will make an impact at the Division I level, but they don't churn out just tons of prospects that make impact.
It's not Texas,
Florida, places like that. So we'll see what Mobley does, even if he goes to Kentucky. I can't imagine why no other SEC team is really recruiting him that heavily. But things have got to change some way or another. I expect at the very minimum here in the offseason that Jim Chaney's going to get fired.
Well, I was going to say, one of my next questions to you guys, will we see coordinator changes?
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of coordinator changes.
I expect Chaney to get fired as the offensive coordinator.
Now, Chaney's a holdover from the Kiffin staff. In fact, he's Lane Kiffin's brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken.
He was brought in to stabilize the changeover. And he runs a very pass-happy offense, as we can all see. He doesn't really emphasize the running game. He was an offensive coach of some kind at Purdue back in the mid-'90s when Drew Brees, I guess, played for Purdue back then. And they threw the ball just constantly. And they never had great success as a team winning games, but they threw it for a lot of passing yards. And you can see that early in this year. We put no emphasis on the running game and throw the ball all over the field constantly. And that works against bad teams, especially when you have Hunter and Rogers both out there. But it doesn't work against teams with a good defense or when they've had a year of film study on you. It starts working.
Or when you lose one of them, they get to double and triple cover the other one.
Yeah. Right. And another area that really we need to see some major changes, special teams.
They don't have a special teams coach, and for some reason nobody ever does. I've never saw a kicking game worse than this one. And I saw return games worse because we had the most woeful return game Farmers last few years when we were last in the country in punt returns and last in the country in stopping kickoff and punt returns. But that's just for some reason that's part of UT's culture for the last 7 or 8 years, just terrible special teams.
You know, okay, the last coaching clinic I went to at UT, back when I was still coaching, this is what baffles me. They've emphasized special teams. Their special guest speaker was, why did I just draw a blank on the guy's name? Virginia Tech. Frank Beamer. His son was a graduate assistant at UT at the time. And it was a special teams happy workshop, and I learned a lot.
For whatever reason, it never translates onto the field. I mean, Young energized the return game somewhat this year. Yesterday, the guy at Kentucky's a great punter. Young, he had no return yards that I can remember on punts, either fair caught or let them bounce. Kickoff returns went to the end zone for the most part. And that's a big part when you give up a lot of yardage that way. Our punting game, I don't understand that Dar. He was a really highly touted punter. He averages 35 yards a punt. That's terrible at the college level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Kentucky's guy averaged 44 yards a punt. That's 10 yards.
And one of the things about him, he had such high boomers that, I mean, his coverage was able to just converge.
I mean, you're giving up 10, 15 yards on every punt when you're Tennessee. You're giving up 5 or 10 yards on every kickoff when you're Tennessee. And that adds up over the course of the game. That's a lot of yardage you're losing in field position. And the fact that we cannot kick a field goal. Pilardi is awful. I don't care. I believe you could try somebody out there with one leg and they would have a better shot at kicking a field goal.
I mean, let's look at the number of students at UT. There has got to be a better kicker than Pilardi there.
We've talked about it. They have that soccer program over there that has done well. I mean, their soccer team actually has done well. They don't get a lot of press, but they've done well on their.
They have a rugby club.
They have a rugby club that, I mean, I don't know much about them, but I mean,
they generally pretty good. Josh Nelson from Campbell County, after his he played 2 years of football at Carson Newman, hurt his knee, decided college football, went from transferred to UT and played rugby for the rest of the time. There's a kicker somewhere on that campus.
And you know, as well as that, with rugby, being able to punt it forward is essential.
Mm.
And so they're probably going to be able to find some talent there. I mean, I'm sure that those guys, either the soccer and the rugby, they would gladly go over to the football side.
You know what I promise you a rugby kid could do if he was punting the ball? Tackle.
Yeah.
Probably go punch you in the head, too.
Well, they would have to reteach them not to punch them in the head. But yes. And you know, the soccer, they're taught to boot pretty hard.
Pilardi, in his case, he kicks everything exceptionally low. I mean, that field goal attempt that would have had the game tied bounced off the bottom of the upright.
Maybe UT needs to do like some of these other schools we've played this season and go to Australia and recruit.
They need some
soccer player.
It's just
right.
It's inexplicable to be that bad at special teams, to be that bad at running the ball. We didn't break it. I think our longest run was around 28 or 29 yards all season.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't break a long touchdown run all season. And the 29-yarder was Dar when he decided to fake punt and ran for the ball for 29 yards. Our punter has the longest rush of the season.
Yeah.
Our best, most viable rushing option against Kentucky was Tyler Bray tucking it and running. He runs like a 5.3 40.
But say he is not a mobile quarterback.
No,
and it's awful. Something has to change. I'm all for giving Dooley another year to see if he can get it worked out because I'm not sure if he can. But frankly, the alternative is probably worse unless, like I say, you have the big name that will take the job over. But he really needs to do something next year very positively to get this back on track. This is the first back-to-back losing seasons that Tennessee has had in 100 years. You don't have back-to-back losing seasons at Tennessee. People can woe and moan about how hard of a job this might be and all this about recruiting. Somebody come on last night and was like, "Oh, you can't recruit to Tennessee. It's just so hard." That's bull. Tennessee has more NFL draft picks since the NFL started drafting in the 30s than any other school in the SEC.
The facilities, I mean, we talk about not spending money on coaches. By golly, they've spent money on facilities. Have y'all been to the indoor practice
They've
facility?
constantly been upgrading the facilities over there and upgrading the stadium. It's time to upgrade the coaches.
I think, and to me, that when we look at this, they're constantly bragging on how much money they put in the, as you said, the indoor football complex, and then the
stadium
the
upgrades.
stadium upgrades, which they keep. I mean, every other year it's like they're starting a new one, and then the basketball.
Thompson Bowen Arena's upgrades.
Yeah, these are constant upgrades, and the money is getting funneled to.
The right coach pays for all of that.
Well, I mean, Bruce
And
Pearl
he-
did the basketball.
And he's hired Saban, and he's paid every dime he made back, and a whole lot more.
And here's the thing. Is okay. We've John pointed out this is the first time ever, pretty much, back-to-back losing seasons for UT football. What do you think it's going to do next season for ticket sales?
Oh, they were down this year. Next year they're gonna lose 5,000 or 10,000 people.
Okay,
And
the money they've put into these facility out there is, I mean, and a lot of it is just making it look pretty from the outside. They're not going to recruit the money because where they put the money is not going to bring money.
Okay, you lose the ticket sales. That's obvious. Then you lose the concession sales.
Merchandise.
You lose the merchandise sales. The worst thing you can lose is merchandise sales.
It's a big deal. It's when you start having those empty seats, people start giving less money. You know, people say it's the economy. Alabama has a worse economy than Tennessee. Alabama sells 100,000 tickets every Saturday because they spent, well, at the time, what was considered an outrageous amount on the coach. There's not a school in the country that wouldn't pay that money now to get Saban and his results.
Yeah, on Twitter yesterday. I mean, I had people that I follow on Twitter that were at the game were just amazed at the amount of empty seats there. In Commonwealth Stadium, when you compare it to Neyland Stadium or some of the other big ones in the SEC, not as big a stadium. I mean, it's not Vanderbilt small.
It holds about 64,000 people.
And it maybe had 50,000 in it, and probably 10,000 of those were UT fans, because there was quite a bit of orange in that stadium. I know all kinds of people who drove up there to see the Vols get bowl eligible. Keep that streak alive. Instead, you had to drive 2.5 hours to, except for possibly West Virginia, the most awful state in the country.
West Virginia's better.
Looking at horse farms. If you're lucky, you got to stop at White Castle on the way back.
You get Kentucky up there, and they don't care about football for the most part. A lot of people act like they care about it today all of a sudden, but they didn't care about it Friday. They have decent fan support. Mm-hmm. And compared to the SEC, it's not that good. Compared to the rest of the country, it's pretty good. But the main thing about this loss, it's not the worst loss Tennessee's ever had, but boy, it's in the top 10. I mean, to me,
I would say it's the worst loss to Kentucky we've ever had.
there's more costly losses. The SEC championship game is the most costly loss we've ever had.
The LSU game.
But Fulmer's loss to Wyoming, in my opinion, was a much worse loss than this one, because Wyoming's a Mountain West team that was 4-7. But this one's pretty bad. I mean, in the SEC, the 2005 Vanderbilt loss and this one are two worst SEC losses, as far as just terrible teams in the last 25 years.
But the morale consequences of this one is pretty significant.
Apparently, the morale was already down if they didn't want to be there, so I can't imagine what it's going to be like now.
That's true.
You know, there's no more games to play now. Now it's time to say if you keep Dooley, he's got to get this team back on the right track, motivated and ready.
I'm just glad we don't have to lose to an ACC opponent in the bowl game this year. At this point, a little bit shifting a little bit. Lady Cougars picked up their first win of the basketball season against the Lady Rebels in Maryville. The boys have had some good days, and they played home Tuesday night.
Maryville's always a really good team on both sides of the ball, so getting that win was pretty big for the Lady Cougars especially. And I said they're going to be fine. They'll work out some keys, get some players back healthy. The guys, they're doing well compared to last year, especially in the last couple of years. They've had a few rough seasons. Got a lot more players out.
Matt's got this team going in the right direction. I've got some faith in Matt Housley. You know, he's as energetic a coach as you'll ever hope to find. The two middle school programs are on a winning track right now. La Follett's a little bit ahead of the game. Of course, they've had a stable coaching staff. Jacksonville's changed coaching staffs, but they've started to pick up wins.
Yeah.
So, you know, Monday night, the middle schools are in action. I encourage everybody to go out, support them. Tuesday night is the home opener for the Cougars, and I would love to see that gym packed for both games.
Yeah.
Not just this I'll watch the fourth quarter of the girls' game crap.
No, girls game starts at 6:30.
6:30 for a high school.
So come out, give them some yells, support them. They love to hear you yelling for them.
You know, they work hard. They really do.
I can speak because I've talked to, I guess, we've talked quite a bit with at least half of the starting lineup for the girls. These girls have put in some hours getting ready for this season.
I've actually talked extensively with, on different occasions, with every member of the girls' starting lineup except Kristen Chapman, and frankly, she doesn't speak.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these girls have worked hard this offseason.
And the guys, you got some football players out there this year, which is good to see, the cooperation with the staffs. Some senior football players, some senior basketball players that are, you know, this is their last go around.
You know, I know a lot of people love Tuffy Shoot during football season. Go cheer him on in basketball, too. Mm-hmm. I know he'd appreciate that. I know the rest of the team would appreciate your support.
This is a big year for both squads. As, you know, the Lady Cougars hoping to get back to Murfreesboro. All the guys are hoping to get to Murfreesboro, too. First year head coach, big year for him. First year head coach at Jacksboro, big year for him. Coach Dawson at La Follette, replacing quite a few key ingredients from a team that finished, I think, second.
And has a completely different staff, except for himself.
New staff. He needs your support. The Jellicoe teams should be pretty good.
Another team looking at a really good shot at Murfreesboro is those Jellicoe boys. Campbell County's first Division I signee since Gary Gray.
And there's probably even elementary school basketball going on around the county.
Yeah, elementary school's almost over. They play a very short season.
Well, we used to play all the way into January. That it's so short now.
It really is. I mean, I remember when we were in elementary school, not that I played basketball, I was far too fat for that. And I still don't know how to dribble a ball. But it's a key ingredient.
It is.
You know, we had games. The tournament usually happened at the end of January. Now the tournament happens usually winds up happening the 1st of January because weather always kills it.
But
of course, there were a lot more teams then in the county.
yeah, there were a lot more elementary schools. They consolidated a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, Pinecrest, Coolidge, College Hill, Stony Fork are all gone.
Newcomb, is it still?
Newcomb is gone.
Elk Valley.
Elk Valley, White Oak, and Jellicoe Elementary still have teams.
And you have East of Follett and West of Follett combined, so that's just one team out of those.
And then of course, Ridgewood's gone. So you basically you've got the three we just mentioned: La Follette, Valley View, Jacksboro, Carrollville. Went from being like 12 or 14 to 7.
I kind of hate that they did away with all the small schools around the county,
I hate consolidation of schools. I always think it's a bad move.
but we'll see you hopefully out there Monday night, Tuesday night. They'll probably play again on Thursday night.
Actually, I would say the Cougars play at home, maybe even both games this week. I think they play. I think they maybe play Clinton Tuesday and rematch maybe with Farragut on Friday.
That's be big games. So come out, support your local teams. Go out to the Christmas parade Saturday. Support your local Santa Claus.
He'll be there. I talked to him.
And I guess that's probably it for this week.
Fans, that will wrap up this week's sports chat. We'll see you next week. We'll talk about basketball. We'll talk about the high schools championships, and we're out of here.